another somewhat sunny day here in Western New York. Another Ziti TV this week, which is cool. It's not always the easiest thing to do to discover what we'll do on a Ziti TV. Sometimes it's very much seat of the pants. It's very, what's happening in the discourse community, what new feature we added, what thing are people not understanding that we want to do a better job of explaining. So it's not always that we have ZDTVs, and we skipped last week, but we're back this week. I didn't think we were going to have one. PKCS 11 is the topic that I thought I was going to show this week, since that is back in the news, so to speak. Our good friend Eugene was going to come back. The problem was we've got some kind of bug sitting in there on Windows, and here I am being a Windows fella, and there is Eugene being a Linux fella. And so it didn't work out. But maybe not next week. Next week is the monthly forum and or office hours. So I still have to put up the discourse post for that. And then maybe the week after that will be PKCS 11. But this week we have a fantastic treat for you. I was watching my Mattermost threads last night when Dariusz threw out a comment that he said, hey, I'm out here trying to Zitify some microservices. I found this sample stuff developed by Google. I started with Ziti sidecars, and it was a pretty neat thing. So I said, hey, Dariusz, how you feel about coming on Ziti TV? Now, mind you, I asked him this, I'd say 2 hours ago. And what did Dariusz say? Dariusz said, yeah, I'll come on. Let's see. We got Paul Otto asking, wait, YubiKey support. Yes, sir. YubiKey support, hardware-based root of trust, TPMs are all a thing. We'll be showing people how that works again, because at one point the ZD Edge tunnel, it stopped working. So it works again. We're going to get that fixed and make sure that it works with hardware root trust. Very important. Dariusz, I see that you appear occupied. He's in the backstage. Are you ready to go here? What do you think? You gonna give me a thumbs up? All right. Dariusz, welcome back.
Hi everyone. Hi, Clint. How are you today? Seems
I'm,
like you're ready,
I'm doing
ready
all
to
right.
go.
I'm always ready to go, buddy. Here in my room, you can see some additional accoutrement because we are having molding replaced. So if you hear nail guns and or pounding, I apologize ahead of time, but that's how it goes when you work from home. And then I've had cat troubles. So you can see I've got some evidence of what was a litter box that was right here, but I decided I don't want that on ZDTV. So I moved that at least. But then I noticed right now, I'm like, oh my goodness, I left a litter back there. But anyway, you can see the scooper. So that's my life story that's going on right now. Yeah, you were doing some interesting stuff with some sample code earlier. Actually, it was late last night, I think. Relatively late. And then I thought what you were doing was neat. And then I didn't expect to get to it today because I wanted to do the PKCS 11 stuff. That has had hit a snag, as I mentioned. So you were so raring to go to come in and show off some sample code. So tell me a little bit about what you're up to. Actually,
Yeah, yeah,
let me throw up our little bumper. There we are. Yeah.
yeah. So we've we've started some discussions, more intense discussions internally about how we can position OpenZiti and Zitifications and stuff like that against other things that are native to Kubernetes clusters, because obviously a lot of applications are deployed in Kubernetes because that's the way the industry is going. And so I wanted to experience myself. I'm not a developer. I'm a network engineer, but wanted to be a developer, wanna be. So I
You play one on TV. You play one on
yes, I
ZDTV. I
just
love
I
it.
just play on TV as a developer. I come across as a developer, but I'm not. But we have some nice simple code in our repos and stuff like that. So especially this is a micro. I wanted to find something that's relatively kind of close to like a microservice application with multiple. I didn't want something that's as simple as close to like microservices as possible. So Google usually is always good when they test something and demo something. They always have some real kind of an application that you can use, and they have this demo, microservices demo, and they there are various it's basically a simple app that simulates a store, online store where you go and buy stuff, or you have a card, you have payments. So you have all these microservices running behind the the curtain, and they're all they're not all written in one language. They're written in multiple languages. Most of them are in Go, but there's some others, like C hash and Python and JavaScript, I think. Yep. So I figured if I could just start, because let's talk about HTML mash and stuff like that. So I wanted to see how we can stack up against, something like that, and what we would break if we kind of, zitify all the way to the application, because obviously it's all encrypted and identity based, and you have to go through our, uh, overlay to get to services and stuff like that. So what would we break if you have that application maintained by Kubernetes and stuff like that? So I cloned, or I cloned the repo, and I started putzing around with it. And obviously the first step was to basically
Did
kind of mimic
you
the.
did you use GKE?
No, 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 I'm just running this on kind.
Gotcha.
I'm just trying to save some money or something. So I'm just like,
Right.
let me run it on my laptop, and it's kind of local, so I can take it anywhere and stuff like that. So
Nice.
yeah.
And now, are you a Minikube kind of guy or K3? What is it? K3S? What's the smaller one called?
K3S, I think.
Is that what it is? I don't know what it stands for. Is it Kate's?
No
Kinds?
idea.
What is the
No
three?
idea.
I know what
Three.
K8S is, but I don't know what K3S stands for.
It's a
I just know it's a
something
smaller version.
something smaller version. It's 3 versus 8.
That's right. So are you running Minikube then? What do you run it on?
I'm running on kind, like what do you call it? Yeah.
Does Kind just set up a virtual
Yeah.
machine for you?
Yeah, kind is I have three nodes, and yeah, running locally on 3 nodes, because kind of I was testing Istio as well with it, and that was the example. So I wanted to use what they use to make sure I don't have any variations in case I am run into issues. And then I progressed from Istio into this demo, which is microservice demo, and yeah. So I had the kind running, and you can even see it that it's because I labeled the nodes. You go into the nodes, you will see that I actually labeled
Oh,
them.
should we
And
show we're not showing
yeah,
your screen yet. Should we show your screen?
yeah,
There we go.
yeah.
Let's
So you could
let's take a
see
look.
it.
Let's make that a bit bigger. All
Yeah,
right.
so you could
Oh
see
yeah.
it that I started with Istio Mesh, kind of working, just trying to learn more about it. And you can see how I labeled them based on their demo. So I just kept it. I was like, there's no point of changing this. So basically 3 nodes, and yeah, and then I deployed um, that microservices based on what Google is documented. So when you go into the pods, um, you see basically in my default namespace, you can see all the microservices running, right? Ad service, card service, checkout service, currency. So all these services that comprise this web application where you go to the store and you kind of um, do your shopping experience. So
Yep.
so I've tested that. As you can see it, it's already progressed, but you can see it like if you zoom in on on how many Docker containers, or the containers are deployed within the pod. You can see it that most of them are 2, which is basically, if you zoom in on that and you go into that, you can see it that there is a sidecar running, right? So basically, kind of like simulating a Istio Mesh, the original
Yep.
one, not the Nabian
Yep.
one, which is basically We're at level layers 4 versus layer 7. That's the difference, but it's still kind of trying to simulate that mesh inside, and also to keep the traffic inside the node, because like obviously customers, users would not want this traffic to leave the node. So I basically, based on our charts that Ken and others, and I think community contributed to that. So I kind of used that as well, deployed it
So
with our
if
chart.
I can real quick, I want to bring up the architecture Oh boy, that looks terrible. I was trying to get a little vibe for what this looks like in my head.
Yeah.
So this right here, these are the microservices that you have deployed, right? Like I saw
Yes.
email, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so it looks like the checkout service will use email, and then checkout uses a bunch of services, front end uses a
Yeah.
bunch of services. And I saw you had a sidecar deployed on the email pod. Is that right?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
do you have a ZD sidecar, a ZD Edge Tunnel sidecar on all of these?
Yes. So all of them have Ziti sidecars right there. You can see it.
How hard was that to implement? Hang on, wait, right now I'm still showing the screen, but so
Yeah.
you have a sidecar on each of
Yeah.
these, and
Yeah.
let's actually I'm gonna flip it back to your screen now. And you said we can see the sidecar running on each of them.
Yeah. So if you can see it,
Oh, you have
right?
to click in order to see it. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You got to see the
Gotcha.
details, but basically, this the way.
And are you sharing the same identity among them all, or do they each
No,
have
no,
their
no.
own
I
identity?
each eye has its own identity. Yes.
Nice. How did
So
you end up
it's
setting that up?
I just uploaded basically, right? So let me go into the details so you can see it, right? So basically you can customize these things, right? So they have a folder where you customize it to yourself, and they have those, deployment manifests, right? So
By the way, Darius, we have a great comment here that says using K9S instead of Lens gives you some cred as a net engineer.
nice.
Sorry. Yeah. So yeah, no, I'm interested how you set up the ZD Edge tunnel sidecars on these things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So this is the manifest for deployment for these that they have there. So I went in there basically, depending on if it's zitified or not. So let me go not the zitified one. So if it's zitified one, let's say if I can say checkout service, right? So basically you go in there, and I just added a container in there, which
Yep.
basically proxy. I put an identity in. I attached, basically the way we have it described in one of our documents. Basically, I follow that, then, attach the volume with the secret key, or this is stored in a secret, and then it's basically uploaded
Gotcha.
to that sidecar. So
That's cool. So each sidecar and does it have its own? It's like a name. I didn't see the how the secret was referenced. Is it
yeah,
by container name or
service name. I checked
yeah?
service Ziti proxy.
Cool.
So I
So you
called
just
it
made a
this
bunch
way.
of identities. Now, do you have to enroll them first before you upload them?
Yeah, I enrolled them first, and then I
Yep.
uploaded.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
All right. So that gives you the sidecar on all of them, and then you had to authorize the individual microservices to communicate to each other.
Yeah, and so then obviously they can communicate each other through services before, but then obviously where uh, then once you have the sidecars and we start intercepting, obviously we create the interceptions, and then I created services with the destinations of those services, so we can kind of grab them on the fly when they
Oh,
come in.
and that's actually this is what I wanted to see too. So the sample code allows you to define the URL that the service is at.
Yeah.
That's important. And I see you used a name as opposed to say localhost or something along those lines. Is there a reason that you used a name instead of localhost?
No, these are. I just didn't want to modify too much. This is what they name
Oh, so that
these
was I
environments.
see.
That's
I
that's
see.
not mine, so I just didn't modify them.
Oh, so you didn't
I
even have to
use them
change
as
it.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
But
cool.
the but the
So you
the
just had
thing
to
is
make the intercept.
right. But the thing is, because we're running inside the pod, right? The destination is basically local host. So 120. It has to be line 27 because we are inside the. So when you create services, when you create services, and unfortunately I use our Cloud Ziti for this because I was already had it. Let me see if I can pull
Cloud
this.
ZD is ZD, so that counts.
Yeah, so just to show you. Yeah, so basically, when you create a service, you have the interception on basically, either the name, the host name, or the host name and the default. Because in a Kubernetes cluster, they use
Yep.
they use the local hosts, right? The local DNS names,
Yep.
something along the lines of the service name and a default space, if it's a
Yep.
default space, or the namespace, and then cluster and local. So I had to intercept all those to make sure that I have the interceptions.
So
Uh,
you covered them all.
yeah. So, um, but I think they use the entire full FQDN to.
I really wish Restream would figure out how to get Linux sharing to be a bit more clear.
So if you
Some
guys don't want to manage your own network, more than welcome to use Cloud City. We do all the management for you, so you don't have to worry about it. Just a plug for it. You don't have to, obviously you don't, but if you look at all these goodies there you have already there. So
Can you make the font a tiny bit bigger for me? Yeah.
oops, going the wrong direction. The wrong direction. So
Yep. Cart service, I see it there.
you
Can
can
we go into
see it.
one and just look at? Yeah, that's what I wanted to see.
So you can see it here. So I had to do that, right? So because this is local, 127, you have to make sure you don't do local host, because if you do
Yeah.
local host, it sometimes picks IPv6.
Yep. Yep.
So
IPv6 is often a challenge. We've
yeah,
had other people end up having strange behavior when IPv6 gets in the way.
right. So local host could use IPv6 if you do local host. I had that issue that it was just picked up. I was like, why is it not working? And it actually picked up IPv6.
Yeah, we had a person on Discourse who had their Minecraft server bound to a IPv4
Uh-huh.
address, and IPv6 was chosen with localhost, and it wouldn't route there, and it was very difficult to figure out how that
Right.
happened and what like because it looks right. I'm like, what do you mean it doesn't work? I'm on localhost.
Right.
Yeah, totally,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. So just that's things like that you have to keep in uh keep
Cool.
in mind. So I set up these services, and then
Yep.
obviously in this case I have AppWins, which was the policies. We're switching these names, so just bear in mind AppWins are like the policy service
Service
policies.
policies. Yeah.
We switching
Generally,
these.
dial service policies too.
Yeah, dial service policies. So we kind of
Yeah.
try to automate this for customers, but we're switching this because we used to have a different product. So we're switching to this. Just keep bear in mind, AppWins are dial policies, and bind policies are set up automatically when you don't have to worry about those if once you set this up. So if you can see the front end, which is the one that I entered, because this is fully the front end is fully zetified, right? So we can go to the code I can show you, but basically what that means is to there's really no ports open on. So if I actually we can go and check that. So if I
And so this
there's
is
no
running
port.
now on your local machine, right?
Yeah.
Like it would be we do you have Z-Rock handy? Because
Nah,
we could also share out your locally running front end to me, and I could go over and hit it from my house. That's always fun.
yeah, I gotta do that. I haven't done that myself. So yeah, sorry. Like,
That's all right. Yeah,
it's
that's how.
next
That's
time
cool.
I'll be more prepared.
Cool. So
Uh,
now are you gonna you're showing code now, or is that the plan, or do you
yeah,
want to show the?
I wanna show something. I wanna go to do a debug on that container just to show you if you go to debug on that container, right? So this is the front end, which is fully zitified, right? So what that means is the rest of them are running. So you can see it. There's only one container here. So if I click on that, right? So if I click on this, it's only one container, right?
Yep.
Wow. Okay, cool. So one container, right?
So
So
that's fully
this
Zetified. It does not need a sidecar. Is your point?
does not need a sidecar. Yes. So basically, Ziti is
Nice.
running in your code, right?
Yep.
Which is that's the ultimate goal.
And
That's
this is
our
the server side too, correct?
Yeah. So this is basically front end.
Because
So front end means you have users accessing. So when you have that, if you pull
right.
up that, if you go to Google and a Microsoft demo, right, you can
Oh,
just
I can show it for you if
cool.
you want.
Okay. Um, yeah. So if you look at this, right? So architectural diagram. Why is it so big?
It's I tried to do the same thing and went back
Oh,
to the README
gee.
because it was gigantic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Like
I
too
think if you
big or
click on
something.
raw view, it would probably look all right, but it's totally legible from here. Yeah,
Yeah, interesting.
there you go.
So yeah, so yeah, so you can see this front end as a user HTTP. So there's an HTTP port that's listening. They have a HTTP front end set up. So they listen for queries on HTTP port 80A,
And it is
80,
okay.
8080.
So it is actually HTTP and not HTTPS then.
Yeah, it's HTTP. Yeah,
Yep.
this is not HTTPS. Yes, it's
Yep.
HTTP. Um, and basically that's the front end and the back end of this, because there's I call it, I don't know if that's a good terminology or not, but this front end has a front end and a back end. So front end is the user kind of connects to it through the
Yep.
HTTP, and the back end is basically using GRCP, right? Connections.
Yep.
Um, so then if
Now
we go,
did you and so there's the listening side of the web service
yeah,
of the service, the front end service, and then there's the side which the front end is dialing or connecting to. Did you
yes.
Zetify both sides?
Yeah, so yes, I did the two steps. First, I was like, let me do the back end, so the GRCP, and that was working. And I was logging. So at that point, I was connecting because I have an edge router in there, and I hosted a service on that edge router. So kind of created like a kind of API gateway type of a thing. So I hosted a service on that router to get to that service from that front end because it wasn't zitified yet. Then
Well,
port
hold on.
80.
So to get when you say to get to that service, you've lost me a tiny bit. So
Yes.
you have a edge router in the Kubernetes cluster, and
Hmm.
on that edge router, you decided to let it host a service, meaning
Yes.
bind a particular service and offload back to the underlay network, right?
Yes.
Was it a certain kind of service? Was it a certain one of those certain services?
Yeah, it's just it was a service where you would um, reach out to dial a that particular service associated with that front end.
No, I'm asking specifically which service was it? Was it like currency or checkout or cart service or ad
No,
service?
front end.
Okay, okay. So
Oh yeah, because the user, I'm talking about a user.
okay.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the first thing you did,
Sorry.
all right. So the first thing you did was expose the front end using an edge router.
Yes.
Okay, now I understand. So we're still talking
Yeah, yeah.
that front side, and then you zetified the actual server so that it didn't need the service to be from the
Yes.
router. Okay, I
Yes.
got you now. I
Yeah.
got you now.
Yeah. So there were two steps. First one was the back end of the front end, and then front end of the front end.
Yeah, and you did the
Yeah.
front end of the front end two times. And
Yeah.
that's a like I do the same thing. I do that routinely. Like I will often use a router or use ZD Edge Tunnel and host the service just so that I can set up my my client side, like me, my ZD tunneler correctly to make sure that it all works. Testing it with the ZD Edge tunnel, I find to be often the first thing I do just to make sure I've got things set up correctly. So makes
Right.
perfect sense to me. Cool. So you and now in your current solution, can you access that front end either way?
So right now it's this deployed fully zitified. So the other end is no longer available. I
Yep.
could if it was, but it's zitified, so you can't really.
Yep. No, I was
Uh,
that's what I wanted you to say.
yeah, you can't because the port. That's why I wanted to.
Ooh,
I
you
wanted
could
to
deploy
log
two
in.
containers, one with Zetified and one unzetified.
Sure. Yeah, because if that comes, that was the question. That's why I posted this in our internal discussion board to because there's contention at that point. Zetification is great and zetifies all the way to the application, and you have encryption, strong identity, and everything else that comes with it. But then the challenges come in as well at the same time because these applications basically are maintained or managed by the Kubernetes clusters control plane. So it gives you ability to, you don't have to manage them yourself, and the Kubernetes cluster control plane manages them. And in case you have these probes where you want these probes to certain way that it queries that front end of the front end, that HTTP endpoint, and sees if there's anything, a problem with that app, with that service. So if it is, it will restart, and most likely restart will help you with that problem, like a kind of lock or something on that front end. But the
So,
problem with
so,
that is,
so if I
yeah.
understand what you're saying when you deploy a workload in Kubernetes, you have the ability to tell Kubernetes to monitor the workload, and if
Hmm.
the workload is no longer responsive, then Kubernetes should take some action, which usually is like terminate that pod and make a new one,
Yeah.
right? And so I think where you're going here, which I'm picking up on,
Hmm.
is once you zetified the front end, Kubernetes couldn't actually access the service anymore,
Yes,
right?
it could not. Right.
And so did your front end just keep crashing and go into a crash loop back off and and you had to just figure out what happened there, or was it obvious when you did that?
It was quickly obvious, became obvious where the router or the container would not start, because there's like two checks. One is to make sure it's ready to be started, and then it's one when it's started just keeps checking if it's
It's
not
doing
in
like
an
a
error
port
state.
probe. Is that what it's
Yeah,
doing?
yeah, it's doing a HTTP, get,
Yep.
basically.
And so
And
what did how did you solve that?
I mean, I just wanted to see if my zetification works. So basically, if you go here, right? So basically, I still don't know how really to enable that. So I basically disabled it. So I could,
Gotcha. Yeah.
so, right. So I basically just went in here and say, I just highlighted from this
The
manifest. I'm
health
like,
check.
health check out,
Yeah.
because I don't have any ports right now to
Just trust
check,
me.
right? So
Well, it's funny you
just
bring
trust
this
me.
up. It's funny you bring this
Yeah.
up because, like, I think we had another user on Discourse make this same exact observation, which I think is really neat, right? Like, if you're in a container orchestration environment, and that container orchestration environment wants to be able to monitor and take action on the health, then you need to be able to allow it to check your health. So, to me, it means we have to have either a sidecar or some other health check type of container that is zetified and basically knows how to turn a HTTP request back into a ZD request, right? So that we
Right.
can do exactly this. Now,
Right.
if I remember correctly, I never get it right either. I think this is what Andrew did with Nginx, right? I think he had yeah, it is because the Nginx stuff that he did will allow you to stand up an Nginx server and then backhaul to a ZD environment somewhere else.
Hmm.
So I think you might be able to use that Nginx project that he wrote to actually implement that health check. And then it also it seems interesting. Like perhaps there's some room for ZD to be more Kubernetes aware in some way
Hmm.
by providing, like, maybe, maybe a router could provide this kind of feature, or something. I don't particularly know, right? Like, it is. I do think it's very interesting, though. It does make me wonder if there's not a way to add a Zetified health checker so that you don't even have to have something listening on anywhere, right? I don't know. I don't know that answer. That's kind of an interesting one.
Yeah, so I mean that's why, I raise that because I've seen it as well. So, discussions can take place, and I'm sure people will come up with something that's going to be genius too, because it's basically customers will customers or users come across this because they use that, and it's
Well,
just
I,
like,
I had this problem myself back like a year ago or whenever it is I did the Zetified Prometheus stuff. The Helm chart for Prometheus, when you deploy it, it comes along with a sidecar that watches the metadata and then
hmm
pokes Prometheus to reload the config if the metadata changes. And so I
hmm
went in following some steps and changed the metadata, but the config watcher couldn't hit the Prometheus endpoint for the same reason, but a little bit different. And so I ended up zetifying their config reloader as well, also written in Go. Which, let's talk about Go for a second. Go makes adding Ziti to something just almost trivial, right? Like,
right.
the abstractions that Go has in place for zero trust, and or
hmm
for you, the developer, owning the creation of the transport is unparalleled in my experience so far. Like, it is by far the best abstraction that I've seen, and I would love every single other language to adopt the same kind of paradigm or something like it, where you allow me to basically provide the transport for your network tooling, like what
Right.
Go does, which is really nice. Well, we
Yeah,
still
definitely.
haven't looked at any code yet, though. Are we going to look at some
Yeah,
actual code?
yeah.
That's all good
So,
backstory for what you were doing. I love it.
so basically, so this is the code that they had, and basically what I did is just inserted the context,
Oh, and it's
Ziti
written in Go.
context.
Look at that.
It's
See?
written Go. So basically what I did is just, this is the Ziti context, right? So basically a few lines of code and some error checking for everything, and printing the identity, and that's it. So basically I got the name of the identity, so I know what the path is to that. Once I grab that, basically,
It's so you mounted the secret in this location, right?
yeah,
And so you knew the name of the secret, you knew where to
yep,
put it, and you put it in the right place for these containers.
yeah. They
Cool.
they they have the source, so the entry to the container is, /source /crc. So I figured I add NetFoundry a folder underneath that and store stuff, NetFoundry related stuff in there. So it's kind of
Cool.
in its own kind of a folder and stuff like that. So that's what the config file is. Grabs the config, initializes Ziti config, and then initializes the context, Ziti
Yep.
context, and all the good stuff that comes with it, and then tries to authenticate with it. And once it's authenticated, GD Context has the authentication ready to go, and then everything else is just their code. So
Now, I wanted to see where you used the
yeah, so the way they have it, they have this must connect grcp function. So they use all these services, how they reach these services. So they just created obviously one function, and they just pass these arguments into that. So I just added a CTX. I could have, and I've done that. I could have not do it here because now you have to be aware of where they're calling these to pass these, right? But I did it this way, at least for now, because I'm doing this in two spots. So in that other spot, the HTTP server is in the main function
hold on. When you
versus,
say you're doing it in two spots, because before I was seeing gRPC, right?
yeah,
And those weren't, yeah, this is what I was looking for. Those weren't
yeah,
servers, they were dialing, right?
yeah. These are this is the backend portion of it. So this is the dialing side,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So this is the grcp when you're dialing the services. So that's the portion, the backend of the front end, right? So that's the one spot. That's the one spot, right? So that's where you dial, right? All these endpoints when you query that service. But then, the front end is basically defined here at the end of the main function, which is right about, where's this? Yeah, right here. So this is, I
Yeah.
commented this out, but this is how they listen, right? On the HTTP port. And I didn't even change the name, anything, right? Because I basically use the same address, even though it's not real address, it's just a name. I mean, it's all strings anyway. So I basically didn't want to even change that. So I used whatever they had, and they kind of
When
fit
you hang on,
my.
when you say you use whatever they had, you did you name your service the same? Is that what you mean?
Yes, I basically also did this. You see, you see when you go here, the front end, I, and they have these services and ports, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they have to have port. So I actually used the entire name as my service name.
Yep.
So
Yep.
so
Just
basically, I
because it's
didn't really,
easier. Sure.
yeah, I didn't want to change too much. So I didn't want
Yeah.
to introduce something else because I was thinking about it. I was like,
Yep.
well, now I have to highlight these out, or and then
Yep.
bring my own environment.
So
So I'm just use that.
this is a fun thing too, because I did the same thing for Prometheus. It was back before we had some of the new features that we have that would make it a bit easier. But one of the things that's really interesting is if you in Prometheus, when I was setting up these sorts of settings where I had to tell Prometheus what are their scrape points to go scrape and that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
Prometheus was validating the URL was a valid URL, which was
Hmm.
annoying because like I don't need a port, right? Like
Right,
so
right.
my port didn't
Yeah,
matter. So I think that's what you're getting at here, right? Your
yeah,
port, who cares what the port number is?
yeah, yes,
But there are other all these other applications, they still aren't quite on board with what it means to be application embedded zero trust. And so
right.
they're doing things like, verifying that the server is reachable, verifying that it's a valid host name. And I'm like, dude, don't do any of that. Like just let me give you a bite and shovel the bites, right?
That's right.
They're trying to be helpful, but it ends up, making what we do really difficult.
Yeah,
So that's cool. I
exactly
can
right.
I can see exactly. I understand exactly why you did it the way you did it. Plus, I mean, you're just having fun doing some demo code anyway. It's not like it's going to be here for eternity.
That's right. Uh, Probably not going to use in production, but
Hey, if it works, man,
you
right?
never know. You never know.
Working
So yeah,
code trumps everything.
so that yeah, yeah, yeah. Working code on my, it's like one of those T-shirts. It works on my machine.
That's
Anyway, yeah. So this is the second part of it, where the front end of the front end, and that's why I left the context in the main function so I can reuse this. And I was thinking, I might even create a separate function that I can call this function twice or something like that. But I didn't. I think they would initialize the context twice, and might have different sessions or something. I'm not sure how that would work. Instead of initializing this once, like here, the way I did it, right? So I
yeah. I mean,
initialized the ZD context right here. Then I,
as long as you're not overwriting it, I don't think it would matter. I'm pretty sure you
okay,
can obtain more than one context, but
okay,
obviously doing it once is better.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that's what I did, and I just separated that unless there's a better way, because they do this. They have this function that they serve and listen at the same time, and I was like, well, I have to initialize listen first before I start serving this. So I found these um, part of the functions. I found listener, and then there was a serve which you provide the listener. So basically I changed, they had basically listen and serve. I just used the serve, and they initialized the listener, and then I served it. That's in that. I wasn't sure if that was going to work, but
So,
worked for me.
I'm not a VS Code expert. On the right hand side, the red that's in the side nav bar, are those the lines of code that changed? What does that red stand for?
No, this is just like, I think not all the
Oh,
libraries are
it's not all
initialized
compiling.
here.
I
Yeah,
gotcha.
it's not
I
all
gotcha.
it's
So is
if
it the
I
green? Is it the green that represents the changes then? Like, because I'm just
no,
trying
the
to
green
get
is
I'm trying to get a scope and show people what the scope for changes are. Because like from what I've seen so far, there were like 10 lines that you introduced to add
yeah.
the context, and then there were like five 5 or 10 lines maybe to use the context. Is that about right?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
those are the two spots right there. Right. The most of it was just like right here. It was one, and then the context was here. I'm not even sure if this really indicates anything on the right hand side. I don't
Gotcha.
think so.
Gotcha.
I don't think it. I just what I did is like actually I did kind of like the kind of try to show where the city context starts and ends, so you know what was added, so to speak.
Yeah. Neat.
Yeah,
That's really cool,
that
man.
yeah, and once you run this, and obviously I had to create because they have their own containers part of this. So if you need to see I mean the image, so I had to compile my own image. So
Yep.
I did it locally, and then I pushed it into my Docker hub.
Gotcha.
As you can see, that's my handle right there. And yeah,
So you just
so
switched it out. I
yeah.
was wondering about that. How much of a pain it would have been to do that little bit.
No, it's not that much. You actually got to go into that, and I was doing something else and it failed here. But basically, yeah, you just run, you run locally because you have the container Docker already there. So
And now what's really neat about this too is you could choose to remove one of the containers from your deployment and run it locally and actually debug it. You know what I mean?
Oh, I tried, but there's a lot of things that's intertwined, so it would fail because it was looking for things.
Oh, like what?
So, I don't remember. I tried to like because I was something wasn't working, and I think was looking. Yeah, not you would have to initialize all those environmentals and stuff like that. I think that's what a lot of things were. These environments. I was lazy.
So
I
there
didn't
were,
try to
I
do it.
got you. So there were other
Yeah,
bits that the
yeah,
container and or Kubernetes was doing on your behalf that made it
yeah,
a bit more difficult.
yeah. It's just
But
more work. I don't. Yeah,
theoretically, you could do it.
you could. I just felt lazy, and I was like, nah, let's just do it there. And
Well,
I
it's,
found
again,
this.
demo code. Yeah.
And I found a way to like debug these things, which is fairly easy. I'm pretty sure people are familiar with those things.
Which
But
things?
let's see, where's my yeah. So like the debug function, like this, somebody created this container that you can
Hmm.
actually. So if I go to, so that's why I wanted to show. See,
It's
there's a
hard to it's
debug.
hard for me to read it for what it's worth.
Okay, hold on. Wait, oh, oh, okay, bigger. There you go.
Is
Let
this
me
starting
see.
up a what is the Go debugger called? Delve? Is it starting up a Delve server? Is that what's going on?
I'm not sure, but you point to an image like Nicola NetShoot image that actually attaches to that pod, and you can like do TCP dump and stuff like that. See this
Hmm.
image? People use this image because it gives you ability to do like because I wanted to do TCP dump and stuff. I wanted to see the packets. And
More
this,
NetEng cred right there.
yes, yes, because I'm a network guy, so I'd like to see packets. I'd like to see what's going on at the low level. What's going, because that's how I'm used to it. So then
Sure.
you just need to grab the front end, the name of that guy, then because I wanted to see, right, and then the target inside the container. The target is the server. That's a container name, the server. It's the only one, so you probably don't even have to do that. But if you have multiple containers, like with a
So
sidecar, then you
what is
actually have
it?
to
Deploy a
specify.
pod a container next to the app itself? Is that what it's doing?
No, it's actually somehow it's using that image and it attaches it. I don't think there's an additional container in there. I never checked, but I don't think there's any additional. Somehow it attaches itself that image to that
Hmm.
to that thing. I didn't go into details. How is it doing it? I just wanted. It just
Yeah.
works for me, so
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
really care
Hey,
how it does it.
when it works, you don't have to ask too many questions, right?
So I can run, these network commands. I can see if it's listening, right? So I can just wanted to see if there's a port listening. If I zidify it, I
Yeah.
just want to
Yeah.
see the port is not there,
Yeah.
and then I wanted to. So that's what I wanted to show that it's, and then you do TCP dump, minus
Yep.
usually is ether 0, and then you can kind of see what kind of traffic is there. Um, so there's so I can watch to see if there's any local traffic, or is it all you see it's all um, front end. This is of cubes. So these are all like DNS queries, I think. Um, And then so let me just stop this. So if I stop this, then I could see, okay, so you can see it, it's the front end, so which is this machine is talking to the cluster router. So this is my Ziti router. So I know that and it's on port 443, so I know these are the edge connections because I'm looking for
Yep.
that to see if it's actually going through the router and to the other side, and that's how I try to verify it if it's working. Because sometimes you see it's working, but then somehow it's avoiding your proxy and it's actually going a different way. So
Cool. Oh, we have an interesting comment from Paul again. Look at this using Delve. He remotely step debugged through ZD controller to get dual auth stuff working. Also, another great upcoming ZD TV. Perhaps Paul will even show up. I know he said he would. It would be fun to see some JWK, JWT, JWKS, and external
yeah,
JWT signers and all that sort of stuff. So look for that ZD TV coming soon. Dariush, anything else that you want to show? That was a lot. That was great.
yeah. No, it's just the experience. We're gonna try to at some point when I finish most of this to create some kind of blog or something. So
Yeah.
get people interested and maybe they can provide their experiences and maybe improve this somehow, give us some feedback and tell us because it's not like we expert, or at least I'm not an expert in Kubernetes. I'm trying like dipping my toes in there and trying to see how Ziti can be as native as possible and not make it as secure it but not make it difficult to deploy it, because that's a two-way sword kind of a thing, right? Oh yeah, I can Zitify it, but then it makes my life more difficult, so to speak, to like maintain this application, right? So
Does it? I
so
don't
yeah,
think.
I, I just
I
like
don't think so. I think
we
it
don't
makes.
know.
I think it makes. I think it makes enough things easier that I'm happy to have it, and
Yeah,
more
it's
secure.
it's it's definitely it's easier to make deploy it, obviously, because
Oh, that's the
it's part
beautiful
of it,
part.
part of your code, right? You don't need no sidecars. You don't have to worry about anything else.
Or even Kubernetes, right? You can just
Yeah,
deploy it wherever.
that's the point. Because we have like an initial like internal discussions, right, about this whole thing, and I'm listening, and I have the same kind of feel and think when I think about this is kind of yes, as long as it's like you treat Kubernetes, because Kubernetes is like something different that they kind of when they started this, they never thought about things that the people are using this for now, right? And they need all these features to kind of to help them with with service connectivity and all that, and they're trying to go across. Now they're cross clusters. Used to be like application within the cluster. Now they're multiple clusters, and so I'm thinking the same thing, right? If you treat this as like another resource, like how you deploy VMs, right? So
Sure.
AWS is just another way to deploy a VM. So this is like another way to deploy Kubernetes, not Kubernetes, but Docker into Kubernetes. And then if you Zitify it, so to speak, right? So you have this, you just have to worry about to deploying it, and then everything moves up the layer. So your
Yeah.
services are this layer, and that service does not know if it's a Kubernetes or is a
It
VM
doesn't need
somewhere
to.
else.
Yeah, that's the
Right,
beautiful part. Yeah.
right, yeah.
Well, Darius, this has been great, man. Thanks for being so brave, coming on ZD TV with such little prep time. I mean, like we're talking for 10 hours, 13 hours, right? Like that's
Yeah,
great. I've enjoyed it. Thanks to the people in the chat. We've had a very active chat today. That's
I
exciting as
know.
well. And we'll
First
see
for
you.
me.
And we'll see everybody next time. Thanks
All
again,
right, see you
Darius.
guys.